The fluorescent lights hummed a weary tune above Axel, a sound like tired bees trapped in a glass jar. The leather of his vest was cool against his arms, the patches. Stiff reminders of allegiances and years spent on the road. He was Axel, a presence. A force in any room, though this morning he felt only the dull ache of road fatigue and the minor annoyance of a weak cup of coffee. He sat in the last booth nearest the back exit, a vantage point he always chose instinctively, a habit ingrained. From a life lived under constant watch, he was not looking for trouble, but he always positioned himself to see it coming. His eyes tracked the raindrops streaking the big window pane, each drop a tiny race losing itself in the grime below his mind. Was on a delivery schedule, a meeting far upstate, the logistics of things too heavy, too important to fail? The smell of stale frying oil and cheap cleaning product filled the air, a scent unique to small-town roadside diners. He lifted the heavy, white mug to his lips, the black coffee, lukewarm bordering on cold, not satisfying at all then. A disturbance in the periphery, a slight shift in the visual plane that drew his gaze without conscious thought. A small figure moved near the counter. A girl, her frame utterly swallowed by a bulky, oversized hoodie the color of weak tea. She seemed to glide rather than walk, her movements, hesitant yet oddly practiced. She settled into a booth, 3 tables down directly across the aisle from Axel. Dismissed her instantly, another bored kid waiting for parents, or maybe a quick stop on a long drive, but then the stillness of her posture registered she was not fiddling with a phone. She was not drawing or bouncing her knee. She sat absolutely motionless, her hands tucked deep inside the sleeves of that huge garment, only her face visible. She was pale to pale, and her eyes darted around the room, like tiny trapped birds, never settling, never resting. A continuous scan of the mundane faces. Inside the diner, Axel watched her through the steam rising from the coffee he was not drinking. He saw the tension in her small shoulders, a rigidity that spoke not of boredom but of a profound alertness. He had seen that look before in crowded places. Intense standoffs, that constant expectation of something bad about to happen. It did not belong on a child. She reached for the ceramic sugar dispenser, a chipped relic of the diner's past. Her fingers wrapped around it tightly, almost possessively. She did not open it, she just held it, a small fortress in her small hands. He heard a breath escape her, a sound so soft it was barely audible above the sizzling grill, but it was not a sigh of relief. It was a suppressed sound, a quick, sharp HNN-like, holding back a cry, a sudden intake of air to control a rising tide of pain or fear that was when his professional detachment shattered. The noise was too real, the fear palpable. Axel leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on the table, his eyes locking onto her face. He saw the desperate calculation in her wide eyes as she finally turned her head and met his stare. He was a big man, a scary man, his vest advertised danger, yet she held his gaze, not with defiance but with an intense plea, an unspoken question. She pushed herself out of the booth. The vinyl squealed a high-pitched protest. She walked straight toward him, a small shadow closing the distance between their two worlds. Axel felt the sudden pressure of silence in the room, the ordinary diner noise receding to a dull roar. He knew this moment was the pivot point, the irreversible decision. He waited for her, knowing exactly what was coming, and his hands slowly withdrew from his mug, leaving the lukewarm coffee behind. Axel did not move, he simply waited, a mountain of leather and denim, absorbing the small girl's approach. The air between them thickened, becoming dense with the unspoken weight of her fear. She stopped right beside his booth, her head tilted back to look up at his face. Axel saw the fine tremor in her lips, but the rest of her face was a mask. A careful blankness that children learn when survival depends on silence. He could smell the faint scent of rain and old laundry on her clothes, and the subtle, metallic tang of fear that he recognized instantly from long ago battles and confrontations. This was not an accidental meeting, this was a targeted appeal, a calculated risk taken by a child who had run out of safer options. Axel knew the uniform of desperation better than most. The light catching the gold thread on his club patch seemed to fascinate her for a brief second, but then her eyes snapped back to his, unwavering and pleading. She did not reach out, she did not make a sound, she simply stood there, demanding his attention, demanding his acknowledgement of her presence and her plight. Axel felt a familiar cold rage begin to simmer deep beneath his ribs, a feeling reserved for those who preyed on the defense list. He slowly released his grip on the coffee mug, its warmth already gone. The clatter when the porcelain touched the saucer sounded explosively loud in the sudden pocket of silence surrounding their table. Axel deliberately avoided looking at the other patrons. The trucker was still hidden behind his newsprint wall, the waitress and the cook were still engaged in their private chuckle, a world away from the silent drama unfolding by the back booth. Then slowly, deliberately, she moved her small hands, emerging from the deep sleeves of the sweatshirt. She began to push the fabric up her left arm. The material resisted slightly, clinging to the skin, but she forced it back, folding the gray cotton above her elbow. Axel's breath hitched a ragged sound. He immediately suppressed. The sight was sickening, a canvas of abuse painted in shades of violent purple, sickly yellow, and deep, angry blue. The bruising was extensive, not just accidental bumps but clear evidence of repeated forceful contact, old injuries fading into fresh wounds. Axel's mind instantly began cataloging the patterns, the severity, the likelihood of bone-deep damage. He did not need a doctor to tell him this was bad, serious systemic violence. His eyes traveled back to her face. She was watching him, watching his reaction for any sign of revulsion, pity, or worse, betrayal. She offered no explanation, no story, just the mute, undeniable evidence. Axel felt the powerful urge to crush something, to find the source of this cruelty and extinguish it immediately. He pushed himself up and out of the booth, the scraping of the heavy seat. A brutal grating noise. Axel's massive silhouette loomed over the girl, casting her in shadow. He did not look at the bruises again. He had seen enough. His decision was made instantly, irrevocably. He looked across the street to the parked sedan, the one he had noted, the one that felt wrong. He knew the next move had to be fast, precise, and finally reached into his pocket, his fingers finding the familiar weight of his cell phone. He did not touch the coffee. He did not finish his sip. The moment for ordinary consumption was long past. Axel stood tall, his silhouette dominating the space around the girl, a towering figure of sudden motion. He reached into the inner pocket of his vest, the action, smooth, practiced, devoid of unnecessary haste. He pulled out his rugged phone, its screen a sharp rectangle of light in the dim diner corner. His eyes remained fixed on the beaten silver sedan parked diagonally across the street, a car that had been there too long. Its driver, either patient or overly confident. His fingers moved across the phone's keypad with speed, born of necessity. He was not calling the police, he was calling his own network. The message was cryptic, brief, and carried the weight of absolute urgency. A single shared map coordinate flashed onto the screen, followed by the contact name Ghost. The text he fired off contained only 3 words. Move now. Threat confirmed. There was no time for preamble, no room for explanation. The code was enough, the urgency understood instantly by the recipient. He did not look down at the girl who still stood beside him like a silent sentinel. He did not offer reassurances or empty promises. Axel knew words were useless now, only action mattered. He slipped the phone back inside his vest pocket, securing it tightly. His focus was entirely external, on the weak point across the street, on the timing of the next few minutes. The girl watched him, her small chest rising and falling quickly with shallow breaths. She seemed to understand the shift, the sudden transition from observation to decisive motion. She had handed him the proof, and he had accepted the mission. Axel turned his whole body, a slow, deliberate pivot toward the diner door. The movement drew every eye in the room. The cook stopped laughing, the trucker lowered his paper slightly, the waitress froze mid-step. Axel ignored them all. They were ghosts themselves, unaware of the real danger outside, unaware of the silent transaction that had just occurred. He took 2 long strides toward the exit, his leather boots thudding softly on the sticky linoleum floor. He reached the door and did not pause. He pushed the heavy glass panel open with brutal efficiency, stepping out into the cold drizzle of the morning rain. As the door swung shut behind his immense frame, the girl finally moved. She walked slowly back to her empty booth, avoiding the eyes of the bewildered patrons. She did not sit down. Instead, she positioned herself by the window next to the table she had occupied. Her gaze fixed intently on the silver sedan across the street, the very car Axel had been watching. A moment later, a sleek black muscle car seemingly materialized from the flow of traffic, squealing to a stop directly behind the sedan. 2 figures exited the black car, moving with synchronized speed and purpose. They did not speak, they did not hesitate, they were efficient and utterly terrifying. The sedan driver, realizing the trap, scrambled, but it was already too late. The girl watched the scene unfold across the street, the silent chaos, the sudden end to her torment. Axel was gone now, completely disappeared.